This is Miss Lizzie, and I want to welcome you to the Queen Lizzie podcast. Together, we will go through the history of Rosewood, Florida, and watch as the once prosperous town rises out of the bloodshed, fire, and ash to reveal the people, the memory, and the legacy of Rosewood. Watch every Thursday on Facebook and YouTube, or listen to our story on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Hello, everybody. I am Lizzie Robinson Jenkins, representing not only the Rosewood Foundation, but the personal testimonies and history of cherished friends and family. We are now watching the Queen Lizzie podcast. Today, we are talking with Dr. Barbara McDade Gordon. Welcome, Dr. Gordon.
Thank you very much, Lizzie, and you know you can call me Barbara.
I will. I will. I am so honored to have you as my guest today.
Thank you very much for asking. It's
Yes.
always nice seeing you.
Yes, and we see each other often.
All the time.
We are both busy, and we are both out there doing whatever we can do to change the digital divide in America.
Yes, and thank you for that.
Yes, it takes all of us working together, and I appreciate people like you who understand, willing to give your time to help us get the history out.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you. It's a pleasure.
Okay. So I'm going to give it over to you and allow you to ask questions if you have questions that you would like to ask me, and we'll just make this into a peace conversation. PEACE.
Okay.
Peace.
Okay.
Conversation. Okay. Or a conversation.
Yes,
Peace.
yes.
Yes, indeed. Okay. So.
Well, I know that many people know about the Rosewood story, the history, and you have certainly been one who's gotten the word out, not only in our Gainesville, Washoe County area, but throughout the U.S. I was talking to you just a few minutes ago about this man from Wisconsin who had heard about it, and he was so inspired that he contacted you, and he's since written a book. You all collaborated on a book. So that is just wonderful. And now I suppose that history generally, and African American history, Black history, has really come into the forefront in these last couple of years.
Yes.
Thank goodness, because it is American history, and we want to keep that going. We want people to be inspired.
Yes.
All people to be inspired by what folks that came before us have done, and certainly continuing to be inspired by people like you who keep the story alive. So I'm sure that those who listen to your podcast know some of this, but I just want to go over some things for our new listeners, just to make sure they're on the same page.
Okay.
What inspired you to become such an advocate, such a vision of the Rosewood history?
My mother is the sister to the Rosewood school teacher who suffered the agony of defeat. Her pain was so painful, she was embarrassed to tell her parents that she had been gang raped. But my mom was 20 at the time, still at home, living with her parents. So she felt like like my aunt, Mahalda Gussie Brown Carrier, she felt like she was able to talk to my mom without shame or so much shame. So she told my mom her story. And the two of them, I assume, just kept the story to themselves. But my mother, I know, wanted us, her children, to know the story. So 20 years later, in 1943, my mom called us, her 4 children. I was 5, and my brother's 7, 9. My sister was 11. And she said, y'all, she didn't say y'all, she said, y'all come and sit on the settee. A lot of people don't know what a settee is. Mama's going to tell you a story about the Rosewood Massacre. And when I, at 5, heard story, and my mom told us stories almost every night, but they were oral history stories that she had lived. And I was ready because those stories she would tell at night would always put me to sleep. So this particular night, she said that to us, and we all gathered around the fireplace, and Mom told us the Rosewood story. I thought when I heard Rosewood, what came to my mind was Roses in the Woods. Massacre, I had no idea what that meant. But for some reason, that story attached itself to me. My brothers, 7 and 9, went to sleep, and my sister was in another world. She didn't want to hear it. But I eventually went to sleep. But before I went to sleep, I guess it was God kind of like anointed me. Okay, with that story, it never left me. I didn't remember the next morning everything she had said, but I do remember her twiddling or whatever, her fingers. And I knew it was pain. I knew that there was pain because I could see it at a small child in her face. So the next morning I wanted to hear more, but it was not time. And my mom kind of like gave me the eye and said, this is not time, because she got up. Every morning my dad would get up at 4 o'clock and make a fire in the stove, and Mom would cook breakfast every morning. So it was breakfast time. However, it became our story later on. When I was going to school, I took that story to school with me, to college with me, to work with me. We didn't talk about it. When I said we didn't talk about it, it was like it was not an everyday thing. But whenever we had an opportunity, we would talk about it. And I was so confused when she told us the story in 1943. I thought it happened like last night, the night before. It had happened 20 years.
20 years.
Earlier. So, but like I said, it stuck to me. And my mom is really the force behind this. She said, history. Okay, we can't erase history. We must keep alive and preserve it. And you must research, authenticate, document, and tell the truth. Never attack anyone about what happened. And that's what I have done. And eventually people have started migrating toward me to want to hear more.
And really, you have gotten that story out, and also illuminated a lot of the other areas or incidents in history in this area and beyond, which is really just a wonderful thing to do, because it's information that people need to know. People need to know. And how has been the reception of folks who you talk to, who have listened to you?
Very positive. I spoke yesterday at a Lutheran church in Orlando, and the people, I'm always surprised when I watch the audience reaction. They were spellbound, if that's the word. They were so attentive, and it makes me feel, I can't explain the feeling, but it makes me feel like I'm doing something right, because they are watching me. So at the end of the service, he spoke to me, the pastor, and I know he was speaking for the entire church. He said, you know what? He said, I was so impressed with the way you told your story so positively. And he said people were locked in to what you were saying. He said he was in the pulpit. He too could see the audience as I did. He said you did an excellent job, and we'd like to have you back. And that is what I do, and I think people follow me because I don't accuse them of what has happened.
Because what is, when people say, well, gee, we don't need to talk about these things in the past because it makes people feel, I don't know, embarrassed or ashamed. What do you say to that? Because we've heard so much of that.
I let them know. I said, well, if you feel ashamed, I have lived it. Through my parents, I lived Jim Crow, okay? And they lived Jim Crow through their parents. I said, this is something that we have lived. And you're expressing a feeling, okay? which is mental, but my feeling is physical. Physical harm has been done to our families. So you need to hear it. And I want you to be a part of it. And I have many people, political, different, Democrats, independents, Republicans, all of us working together. We have the same story. It's our history. It's not my history. It's our history that we created here. Okay? And somebody has to be tell the story.
Yes.
And keep the history.
And black people or African Americans are not the only ones with stories, with histories.
Exactly.
And this has opened up, I think certainly you have been a major force in this, has opened up the fascination with and the study of history to people, just like you say, at the church, students, young people.
Right.
They want knowledge. Knowledge is important.
They do, and I get many calls. People call me and they ask me, Mrs. Jenkins, you don't know me. My name is, am I a member of the Rosewood situation? I says, baby, I don't know. I can't tell you. And I ask them give me your mom's name, your father, your last and first name, both parents' last name. And I have worked with them, helping them to identify themselves, and many of them want to be. And the last guy that I talked to a couple of days ago, he said, I know that is my family. I know. He said, I can feel it. I've been there, picked up on the energy. I know I'm there. I said, well, if you believe it, then you are probably a member of the Rosewood Connection.
Then that's what I was going to ask you. Are there people that you meet who know your aunt and or feel a connection with her still? Or of the people, of the descendants of that incident?
That's what they feel. They feel disconnected with someone from that area, because we have, there are 6 Rosewood Foundations, okay? We know each other. We're getting to know each other. Okay.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. And their story is different, because some of the people left in the middle of the night walking through the swamp. Some never came back. Some never reconnected with their families. And those people are out there. But there are those, like the people that call me, and they want to know. I don't know. But they want to hear my story. And I'll tell them what I know, and then they are doing their own research. Okay? And I encourage them and tell them how to get started. And it's amazing.
That's great, because I moved to Gainesville in 1990, and I think it was probably a few years later that I heard about the story from I think it was a Newsweek magazine article, and that was when there was some move to look at that history and have reparations from the state, because something that I was reading, that up until then, people were still so afraid from 1920s until 1980 that the descendants, they would not talk about it. They were afraid.
So true. So true. And we're going to pause here, and then we're going to come back, and we'll pick up Okay, from where we just left off. So that's about time for our first half. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Meldon Law has been serving personal injury victims since 1971. In those days, Jeffrey Meldon's presence as an attorney in the music scene dubbed him with the nickname the Hippie Attorney. And although times have changed, 2 things haven't: our commitment to bettering our community by helping the injured,
Albert, are you ready to go to the game?
and our love for the Florida Gators.
If you bleed orange and blue, Meldon Law is the firm for you.
I am Black History.
I am Rosewood Black History.
I am Florida and America's Black History. And you are too. January 1st, 1923, the KKK insurrectionists attacked Rosewood, killing 5, burning it down.
because a white woman lied and cried. A black man assaulted me. Rosewood redevelopment is on its way.
Want to help? Visit rosewoodflorida.com.
Welcome back to Queen Lizzie Podcast, brought to you weekly from the Steve Spurrier Podcast Room at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. We are here with Dr. Barbara McDade Gordon. The Queen Lizzie Podcast is brought to you by Campus USA Credit Union, live from the Melbourne Law Gator Studios at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. And when we are in the first half of the show, we were talking about, tell me again.
We were talking about the fact that it took almost 60 years before people were able to bring this topic back up again,
right,
and introduce the idea of reparations to the people who had suffered, the descendants of the folks who had suffered during the massacre in 1923.
Yes.
1980s when it came back.
People were still afraid, and we were part of that group. My mom, we didn't, remember I said earlier, Mom, we didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay, it was 1982 when Minnie Lee and Lee Ruther went to 60 Minutes and talked with Ed Bradley about their experiences as 7 and 9-year-old descendants. And it was time then for Mom and me to let people know that our family was involved and that her sister was a school teacher. That is when we got our message out. And people didn't believe it, not even the journalists from Levy County. So my mom said to her, she wanted to interview us, and she came out to our house in Archer. She interviewed my mom, and she said, well, how can we prove that you are related? Mom said, well, go to the courthouse, look in the wedding records book, the marriage records, and look for my sister, Matilda Brown, who married Aaron Carrier, a Rosewood descendant, on December 19, 1917. So when she did her article in the newspaper, she voiced that. And then people were beginning to ask us, me, to come and speak. And I remember speaking at my church. I was a member of Mount Pleasant in that time, and I did my speech in February of that year for Mount Pleasant, and people were just amazed. And I have been talking ever since about Rosewood. But yes, we were afraid to talk about it outside of the house. Yes, indeed. So we have come a long way.
Yes,
yes,
really,
we have.
We really have. Because you've written several books, a book for children, and I got one that you were so kind enough to autograph and send to my grandson in Maryland, and he really appreciated it.
Wonderful.
One thing that not just one thing, but several of the things that you do is you talk about, in spite of the unfortunate, the awful situation, that there were both black and whites who managed to work together, work through this, even during the incident. What's your relationship with the white Rosewood citizens before, after, and now?
I developed a friendship relationship with the family members that sought me out, heard about the good work I was doing. When I say the good work, the positive work that I was doing, getting the message out, not accusing anyone. And that was a turn on to the family members, the white Rosewood descendants. And they let me know, that's our Rosewood history too. We are descendants and we want to be involved. So that was a plus, and that inspired me to do more research and find out about what really happened and who they were. And my mom, before I started speaking, my mom said, I got to write you a song because you got to tell the story. And to get those white people involved more, she talked about the sheriff and the store owner that worked around the clock. And the song goes like this, to involve some of the the people in. I'm just going to do one verse today. But the Cedar Key train conductors were told to pick up in Rosewood. Standing by the tracks with the lantern, its young school teacher stood. That was her sister, waiting in desperation to carry out the sheriff's plan, rounding up the hidden survivors to board the midnight train. The sheriff and the store owner worked around the clock, informed the train conductors just when and where to stop, which was in Rosewood, pick up the men, women, and children who were hiding out, and bring them to Archer, Florida, traveling the same old route. And the teacher was in Rosewood, standing by the railroad tracks with a long black skirt and a lantern, so that when the train was approaching Rosewood, she was advised to move that skirt. She had a lantern. They gave her a lantern, the Wrights, John Wright and his wife gave her a lantern and said, okay, when the train gets close enough to see you, they will not see you, but you move your skirt back and forth so that the train would see you. The reason they didn't give her a skirt that she could not hide, because the mob was out there somewhere in the dark, okay? So she was scared to death. But I have done almost everything my mom said in an effort to get that story out and not keep it a secret any longer. Tell it. And as of today, I'm still doing research. I went to the courthouse this morning, and I met and
in
I got
Bronson and Levy County. Yes.
Thank you for adding that. In Bronson, Levy County, where everything is housed, all of the information. And I met the new clerk of court, Matt Brooke. He was very, very, very supportive, and he said this, because when I first went there, they blocked my research. He said, this is the people's house. This courthouse belonged to the people. You're welcome here anytime, and anything I can do to help you, let me know. We have a young lady who comes in, she volunteers twice a week. Come back on Tuesday or Thursday, and she will help you. And I said to him, who are you talking about, Donna? He said, yes. I said, I know her. We have been working together. Okay. So he is different, and I appreciate him for what he is doing. He is going to be coming on my podcast show. He allowed me to take a picture, snap a picture of him. And I said, may I post it? He said, yes. And while I was there, he had another meeting. So while I was there, I went down in the basement again and did some more research, looking for some specific items. And a couple of the ladies came down from the office and talked to me. It's different, because the first time I went there doing my research, it was not pleasant at all.
It was hostile.
It was very hostile, but it's so different. And I can't wait to get home to call the lady who helped me in 1982. She was really good, and it may have been 83. Well, that's close enough. And she was really good, and she was very, very knowledgeable about what I was looking for, and she was helping me.
Great.
She was fired. And not like Fired. But today we're still good friends, okay? And I had an event last year, and I made sure I gave her a Rosewood Award for the influential Rosewood women. And I made sure I gave her one of the awards. So it has been a journey.
It's been a journey, and there seems to be more light in this tunnel, which you're bringing this to light, because you mentioned that there was, of the sheriffs who were throughout history, their plaques, their pictures are on the courthouse walls, except for the one sheriff who was able to help the people flee. And so there's still some lingering.
It is, and that is why, and I'm going to bring this up to them, and that is why I'm still researching, working my way in, so that this man helped people, saved lives. He was the person who was in charge of getting that train, okay, to come through Rosewood and pick up the people. He had gone to several train conductors that are, in Cedar Key. There's a train, can't think, depot, not depot. Anyway, he was responsible for going and begging these people, different train conductors, and they all said no. Eventually, my mom said he worked 96 hours straight, and one conductor, a couple of conductors from Briceville, the Bryce brothers said to him, Bob, if we can leave at like 4 a.m. in the morning when everybody else was asleep, everybody like the bad guys, he said, we'll make sure we will do something. But if they're driving the train, they need help. So there were some men, I call them my Rosewood heroes, unsung heroes from Cedar Key, that said we'll help. And they were the persons, the unsung heroes, when the train stopped in Rosewood. They exited that train, got off the train, and helped the women, children, and the elderly onto the train to move them out of danger.
And what do you think? We always say this, we're Americans, we're all in this together, but we have had an unfortunate history. But what do you think motivated those people to help, the sheriff, the Cedar Key train depot people, and others to help? In a way, they were risking their lives at
Exactly.
the time.
But they have a heart, okay? And you know, the KKK, when people hear the KKK, my friend told me, she said, Liz, there are some KKK members that's more afraid of other KK members than you are. She said, and what I'm about to say now, one of the Rosewood, one of the Bryce's, who were the train conductor's granddaughter, said to me, she said, every white man had to sign an oath, okay? And every white man was not a KKK, did not want to be. And she said to prove that, and if they did, they retaliated, like you just said, they risked their lives. And these two guys, the train conductors, risked their lives, she said, and you know what happened as a result of them helping the Rosewood people escape? She said in 1924, my granddad was on his horse riding through the woods, and they spooked his horse, and he fell off and broke his neck and died. That's retaliation. So yes, they were at risk.
We, as I mentioned to you, my daughter and her husband and grandson were here. We're visiting here a couple of years ago, and we were talking about the Rosewood incident, massacre. And it just so happened we pulled it up on Netflix and looked at the movie that John Singleton made many years ago, and that inspired, motivated them to get in their car and go down, Archer Road and look at the marker, the historical marker. People have criticized that movie. What did they get wrong in the movie?
The movie, my mother was age 20 when it happened. So when John Singleton did the movie, they brought it to Gainesville, of course, so they can get some input. So they invited my mother, because of my being able to put her out there and let people know she was the expert on Rosewood. Well, her sister was a teacher. They invited her to speak. I took my mom, and she took all of her grandchildren that did not want to go, and one of them had the nerve to tell her, Grandma, I ain't going, it's too painful. She said, you are going to go. If my sister lived in, you are going to go watch it. He said, yes, ma'am. They all watched. After the movie, they said, Mrs. Robinson, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate the movie? She said, well, I give it a 7. And she followed up with, the movie let people know that Rosewood existed and the fighting and killing happened. And it also let people know that women will lie on men. And they didn't want to hear that, some of them. And my mom said, my mom was 95 at the time, put her hand on her shoulder. She said, not only did it happen then, lying on black men, she said, it's still happening today. complete silence. Okay? So the story goes on and on and on. And I want to quickly thank our sponsors, Steve Spurrier. Who else?
The beautiful studio. It is a wonderful, the Steve Spurrier's Grill. Yes.
Yes, it is. And I'm honored to be working here. And Freddie Weeby and U.S. Credit Union. Okay, the campus, thank you. Campus USA Credit Union. So, thank you. Would you have like to say something else, closing remarks?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me as a guest so we could talk about this. And just like others, the story, every time I talk with you or hear you speak, I learn something new. And I'm glad that we're talking about history and we're getting the word out. And that can only be good because, as we know, if we don't know our history, we are doomed to repeat it. If it's not good history, but there's a lot of good history that we can repeat. So, yes, thank you so much for what you're doing, Queen Lizzie Robinson Jenkins.
Well, thank you for being my guest. Okay, I am continuously humbled, honored, and blessed to meet people daily and invite them to join in peace building, healing, and reconciliation through learning about the history of Rosewood. That will wrap up today's episode. I am Queen Lizzie. Until next time, this is my Rosewood story, and I'm sticking to it. Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.